So now we're going to think globally for a minute and internationally. We are so fortunate to have two wonderful colleagues that have been with us at a number of these gatherings, and they've come from Northern Ireland to share their work on shared education that they're doing in Northern Ireland, but also in Israel and the Balkans. So we're going to hear from Professor Mark Baker and Dr. Gavin Duffy. Please come up, gentlemen.
It's very really nice and back again. What we wanted to do is give you a very, very brief overview of what we do and who we are. I'm conscious that maybe some of you haven't heard us present before, and we know the time's tight, so we will keep it to the 20 minutes. What we want to do is give you a perspective of our work, first of all in Northern Ireland, and then, as Sheena said, moving that broader into places like Israel and even in the Balkans. So one of the things we want to do is just to give you a very quick idea of what a divided or a separate education system looks like. And it's important to preface the idea that when we talk about a separate education system, we don't mean that it's an enforced separation. It's not a segregated education system, and it's entirely based on parental choice. So parents can send their children to whatever school they like. So if you have a Catholic school, and we refer to them as Catholic schools and Protestant schools, but that's technically not right. But for the purposes of today, it's probably easier for us all to kind of have that kind of conversation and discussion. But to give you an idea, the grand narrative of this slide is that Catholics go to Catholic schools and Protestants go to Protestant schools. And the likelihood is that you will find, you're unlikely to find a Protestant in a Catholic school. Where there is some crossover, tends to be at the grammar level, which is around post-primary education, and it tends to be around selective education. But for the most part, yes, that's the extent. The vast majority of Catholic go to Catholic schools and the vast majority of Protestants go to Protestant schools, which is an uncomfortable kind of situation, I think, to be in. And what's important is that there's been a number of initiatives over the last 30 or 40 years to try to encourage young people from both communities, first of all, to have a level of contact with one another. And so these kind of contact initiatives tend to be light touch. They're often described as light touch in the sense that they would have always been about maybe bringing kids together for a day or going off on a day trip together to somewhere. No sustainability, no longevity, and often the themes like the conflict and identity and sectarianism were often avoided. Other types of initiatives that have been tried in Northern Ireland are curricular ones. So that's where you will look at themes like conflict and sectarianism and identity through common subjects like history and through religion and through a subject we call citizenship or learning for life and work, which I think roughly translates to social studies. And again, the evidence is reasonably limited as to the impact that's having. So we come along, I suppose, and we introduce another or a new educational initiative, which we call sharing or sharing education or collaboration. Sharing tends to be the relationship between pupils learning together, and collaboration is a much more broader term between two schools or three schools. So our model is based on the idea of regular and sustained contact between pupils. It's also important that we think that it's embedded within the curriculum. If it's embedded within the curriculum, it's not peripheral activity, it's not extracurricular activity. We find that schools tend to take it much more seriously because it becomes about the core business of what schools actually do, and that's how we build a sustainable model. And in doing so then, first of all, we work on the basis of bringing pupils together who learn together, but then we work on the basis of broadening it out further so that it's teachers working together, leaders working together, and much more broader, basically whole schools working together. And in doing so then, that helps to create what we call collaborative networks. And these networks are where new information is created, new knowledge is created, resources are shared, expertise is shared. So what we think are the three interlocking benefits of this type of approach in terms of education. And we've been running this since 2007 to the present. We think there are three benefits. One is we think that there are economic benefits. So when schools share resources, they share teachers, they share expertise, there's an economic benefit there. We also think that there's a cohesive, a societal benefit, the idea of bringing Catholics and Protestants to learn together, children to work together, and essentially sectors. I mean, you've got Protestant schools and Catholic schools, and they are essentially sectoral islands away from one another. So the idea that you bring those two sectors together to work together also. And then we think possibly the biggest one is are the educational benefits. That's where you have teachers involved, you have curricular activity, you broaden out choice, you offer people a much broader curricular offer. So this is where we are to present. I mean, we've worked since 2007, and there have been 3 phases of shared education. One of them, the first phase ran from 2007 to 2010. As you can see, we work with 12 school partnerships, and that involves 65 schools. The 65 schools are made up of primary and post-primary schools. There were 3,500 pupils involved. In phase 2, we had, again, 12 school partnerships, and that involves 72 schools across Northern Ireland. Our current phase, we've got 17 school partnerships, and we also include a collaborative project that we work with in a city called Derry, or Londonderry, and the city has 2 names, and one side of the community refers to it as Derry, and the other side of the community refers to it as Londonderry, which is an odd sort of scenario. But so you can see we're working with around 5,000 kids and 43 schools. So this model is Mark and I's model of redundancy. This is the type of educational model that gets rid of us eventually and embeds the notion of shared education and collaboration within the system. We introduce a whole, I mean, the arrow kind of model at the top does 2 things. One, it categorizes schools. It categorizes the type of collaborative activity that's currently going on in Northern Ireland. So on one end, you've got schools in isolation, so that's schools who don't work with one another. That's actually quite rare, I think. To the other side, where you have these symbiotic, interdependent relationships between schools, where schools are so institutionally close and so tight together that they could often maybe not survive without one another. And in between are a broad range, so you have organic partnerships, you have emerging partnerships, and our role is about trying to take partners maybe at a lower stage, say in the green, and help them develop and become much more effective as they move along. For some of our partnerships, they jump along those kind of sections over a period of years. Others move within just one kind of section, and that's still a significant thing given the context of what the partnership might be about. But over time, we've kind of realized, we began by introducing this idea of sort of activities and programs with schools. So that's where you maybe get 2 schools and they do a joint history program. And it was locked within that particular sort of rigid box. But over time, we started to realize that once we broadened that out, it started to involve other teachers, and we started to see the idea of collaboration maybe filtering down into other departments, and therefore the idea of collaboration broadens to include a whole institution or whole institutions. That relationships between schools, between teachers, between leaders, started to make a much more sustainable, a much more effective partnership, to the point where we hope that we're at the point where we're trying to embed the notion of collaboration right into the system. So the next 2 slides are essentially our global update in terms of Northern Ireland. This is where we are at the minute. So we are reasonably close to the idea of a systemic approach to collaboration in Northern Ireland. There are 3 big things happening. Well, there are actually 4. The 4th we'll talk about in a second. So we have a Shared Education Signature project, which is a reasonably well-funded project that's about to launch, where £25 million has been put into, and that's made of external funders and our own governmental funders. And it will involve creating 300 partnerships across Northern Ireland. That will involve roughly 750 schools. We are starting to cover the majority of our schools in Northern Ireland. Now, some of those partnerships, as I said, will be small, they'll be organic, they might not become anything broad, but some of those partnerships will evolve and develop. We think that's kind of where our role is. We also have this idea of shared campuses. Shared campuses, I think, translate quite well in terms of what you guys call co-location. So we have a number of campuses across Northern Ireland that have received the go-ahead to start developing shared campuses, and that's where they may share facilities. There may be new builds, so you'll have two schools reasonably closely located beside one another. They'll get one school may get a brand new site, and the other school may also get a brand new site. One school might do maths, the other school might do arts, but those two brand new buildings become shared facilities that schools from either side of the community use. We're also in the process of an inquiry into shared education and integrated education. This isn't new. We've done this before, where we have essentially defined what shared education actually is. But we're starting to feed into this process, which is actually quite exciting. So it's getting governmental traction, essentially, and policy traction. So this is our important piece of information. Our strategy here is to stay calm, say nothing, and hope that very recently an amendment was put into a new bill. We have 5 educational authorities across Northern Ireland, and we are condensing them or rationalising those into one authority. So to create one authority, we need a new bill, and within that bill, one of our independent politicians very quietly slipped in an amendment, and the amendment was that it'll be the duty on this new authority to support and encourage and facilitate shared education. So that has never existed before. There has been no legislative basis for shared education. So we basically, our strategy is just say nothing and hopefully it gets through. And the reason why is because we know that the definition of shared education is still not settled in Northern Ireland. And we have a number of parties who may have issues around that. But we know that on Tuesday, that it goes to one of the most advanced sort of consideration stages, and that's where the parties will basically come together and have one more debate around shared education. And if we get past that, it can't be amended any further. So shared education will be legislatively not defined, but will be put into legislation in Northern Ireland. Then our politicians have a job of work to do, in the sense that they actually have an urgency to start to define it. So that's where we are. So we've come from basically shared history programs or shared whatever types of programs to hopefully a legislative basis for shared education in Northern Ireland. I'll hand you over to Mark.
He's Gavin, by the way, and I'm Mark, yes. Yes. I mean, this is, I mean, as Dean Shane said earlier, this is all about impact of a university on the system in Northern Ireland, and we're incredibly proud, and our university thankfully is very proud as well. Taking a programme from very small initial steps to ultimately making it systemic within Northern Ireland, and actually producing legislation. That's something that universities often do. And so having a positive effect on our local community and our is massive. And I think, I mean, the other thing that I usually say is that it's thank you to all of you for 2 reasons. Number one, because your tax dollars have funded a lot of this. The International Fund for Ireland is very heavily funded by the US, so thank you very much for your support in this. And all of you who have been through LAX duty-free over the last probably 40, 50 years, Chuck Feeney's The Atlantic Philanthropies is still our main funder and funds the government initiative. He's funding 50% of that, so there's a huge impact that's coming from there, so thank you very much. One of the key things moving on is that obviously there's been a lot of interest. I mean, we believe that collaboration is a solution to many problems. I mean, I think you yourselves identify that, and there's been a lot of conversation this morning about the value of collaboration internally within schools, and between schools, and between groups of schools, and between schools and universities. Obviously, in schools and higher ed, that level of collaboration is very valuable. Our specific area, obviously, is where collaboration can lead to the breaking down of barriers between kids, between communities, and between schools. Recently, we have, over the past 3 years, we've started to move into some rather interesting areas. This is a photo of, this is the Israeli flag, this is the Israeli Minister of Education, and this is our boss, Professor Tony Gallagher. And Tony and I presented in front of, that's the cabinet of the Ministry of Education in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, about 5-6 months ago. And Gavin and I are going back in a couple of weeks' time. Now, Israel is a complex society, hugely divided internally, We're not talking about Gaza or the West Bank, we're just talking within Israel, but you're talking 64% Jewish, 36% are Arab, separate schools, separate towns often, but there's overlap in many places. And in a number of places what you have is groups of schools that have had some kind of relationship in the past, starting to work together. Working together because they face the same challenges, the same educational challenges. They have numeracy literacy issues, they have societal issues within the schools, also they have issues around resources, and they have similar issues around resources. So again, it's using the collaboration between schools and the relationships between teachers and principals to push that down into the pupils so the pupils start to get to know each other. So that kind of contact, that's Israel. We also, I have a map, there we are. It's not a geography lesson at all, but we all know where Israel is. One of the key areas as well that we work is up here, which is nominally called the Balkans, but like the Baltic states, it doesn't really exist as any political sense. But two key areas that we work in, if I can get this to work, I'll point. Macedonia, which had a conflict in the late 90s, early 2000s, split between Macedonians and Albanians, very, very similar to the context in Israel, where you've had a peace accord, Macedonia is split, the Dayton Accord actually was the peace in the Ohrid, was the Ohrid Conference, which was the peace in Macedonia. But there you've got separate schools. They have co-locations similar to yours. They have buildings, but one floor will be a Macedonian floor, the next floor up will be an Albanian floor, and maybe the next floor up will be a Turkish floor. Now you can see that if you actually build that on top of a conflict, or past conflict, you can see the issues, you can see the problems around symbols. I mean, we have problems in Northern Ireland around which flag we fly. And we have no agreement really around which flags we fly, whether it's the British Union flag or the Irish tricolour. They have a very nice accord in Macedonia, which is that you can fly the Macedonian flag, and you can also fly the Albanian flag, but the Macedonian flag always has to be twice the size of the Albanian flag. and I mean, that's an accommodation they've come to. But you can see how that's problematic in a school, where the school is split on floors. And also what you'll have is you'll have a school which is shared in the morning, it's a Macedonian school, in the afternoon, it's an Albanian school. And you can see there are huge amounts of which entrance do you go in, what do you have in the hallway, and these are the sort of things that potentially happen in co-locations. So there was we're very interested in the co-locations here because, as Gazman was talking about, shared campuses in Northern Ireland are happening by, for the most part, choice. Our schools are choosing to go in together. I suspect, and this is a massive generalisation, that co-locations haven't necessarily happened here by choice. So it's coming from different ends, but believe you, the challenges are the same. We start with a different relationship. So in effect, you just have to get to a relationship. There's a lot of parallels happening between the two. And the other area that we're working, one of the other areas that we're working is in Bosnia. And again, Bosnia is a very complex place. A long conflict there that resulted in two states coming out of one, a patchwork quilt of splits between the two, actually going from, it's very difficult to go from one place to the other because they didn't just divide the map. There were little, if there's a Serb area, it's part of the Republic of Serbia. If there's a Bosnian area, it's part of Bosnian Herzegovina. Going between the two is very, very complex. But you get schools that in the past would have worked together, then are now split because they're actually in different countries. And so trying to get the schools to work across those boundaries is complex, but you can see the schools actually have the same educational issues. Good thing in Bosnia is they have the same language as well. Problem, of course, in Macedonia and Israel is the schools have different languages, which is an extra layer of problem. But I mean, I think we're quite proud of where we've come from, but we don't believe we have the answers. We don't have solutions. We know that collaboration is hugely valuable, and we're constantly looking for the evidence that supports those educational, economical, and societal outcomes. And it's a constant research. And where we're going, Gavin talks about redundancy. He's younger than me. I don't think he really wants to be redundant just yet. No, he doesn't. We've moved away now from the program element. We think we've done that. If we get the legislation, we're complete. And we're now looking at the research, the evidence that clearly supports that collaboration can provide solutions to challenges. And I think that's why we come here, that and the weather. It's because of we believe that you have some solutions to some of our problems. We also believe we have some things that might be able to support some of the things that you might do in the future. Oh, you really? Well, I finished that. But there we are. So that's where we are now, and we'll keep you updated on this amendment, which, I mean, if any of you have been involved in legislative processes, it's complex. Northern Ireland is excessively complex because we have very interesting power sharing agreement. You have to get everybody to agree almost to everything to get anything through. And there has been no substantive legislation passed by our Assembly in education for a long period of time. So this is a huge opportunity. And as Gavin said, in effect, by putting in the amendment into a bill, it causes a problem for the Minister of Education because he has shared education, which is not defined. I hope this video doesn't go out until after Tuesday. Which is not defined. It is not defined in law. There is no legislative definition to shared education. So what it means he has to do is create a bill for shared education. And that's our opportunity. So this is keep it quiet, get it in there. He knows it's there, and now he has to bring forward further legislation. But you know, neither Gavin and I, or our kids call up it obvious, but we've not reasonably click quickly. And it's all about the relationships between the LAs. And the positive thing is that we've won the battle with the research evidence that exists already and the programs that you can point to, so that our system now, our government system now accepts that this is actually something of value to the Ireland. It's just difficult to say. And I think if you can combine research evidence with on-the-ground programs you can point to and relationships that you can show, that's when you actually push it over the line. And so that's where we are now. So